Welcome to Gold Derby. I'm senior editor Denton Davidson here with John Hillcoat, who directed all 6 episodes and co-executive produced the Showtime limited series George and Tammy. John, this is a huge undertaking, and not all directors will take on every episode of a series like this. So, how were you brought on board, and when was it decided that you would direct every episode?
Well, it came about through actually COVID circumstances. I happened to be in Australia, and Michael Shannon, who I'd been in touch with over the years, trying to align on various projects. Um, Likewise with Jessica in the past, but with Michael, I saw him in Byron Bay of all places. He was doing a show with Nicole Kidman, and we then we reconnected. And when I got back, he mentioned this show. Of course, I was like music biogs. I prefer documentaries, to be honest. And then I also grew up with incredible music and musicians in my life. So, and then of course knew of George and Tammy, so that was a rather overwhelming prospect. But they asked me to consider all 6 if they wanted it a consistency there. And once I started to read more about the lives of these characters, once I got past the sort of overwhelming thing about the voices of George, Joan, and Tammy. Once I didn't actually know that much about their lives. So it was this incredible love story that struck me. And I love character-driven things, and the 2 great actors. And then we managed to build this incredible ensemble with, you know, all these like Walt Goggins and Steve Zahn and Kelly McCormack and David Wilson Barnes. And so it was just this, I couldn't say no, really. Yeah. Also, it was my first foray into TV, in a more, yeah.
It's an
I,
ambitious,
sorry,
ambitious foray.
I say that I did an episode of Black Mirror, but that's a one-off. Each, it's an anthology, so it's different.
Black Mirror is almost like a short film.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Yeah.
when you've got 2 of the greatest working actors in Michael Shannon and Jessica Chastain, in addition to this other great cast that you've talked about, how does that impact your work? What was it like working with them?
Oh well, I actually love working with actors of all. They're most actors I've worked with have remained like family. It's like this traveling circus that goes around the world, and we, go through this intense time together. So, it's I know that for them it was very difficult in terms of they were both terrified of the singing aspect.
Yeah.
I mean, they were there was, because they both had great voices anyway, but we all knew that there was this, I use the analogy of Mozart. It's like really George Jones and Tammy were so unique and off the charts, that it was an impossible stretch. But we also knew, well, it's about this character and this love story primarily, and the music is an expression of that, and the emotions coming from them in that. So we rolled up our sleeves on that, and they put in an immense amount of time into prepping and working with the voice, rehearsing, pre-records for 7 months. So I think all of that helped get them there. We also had a live mic too, because you can't, when you mime, you can see, the face is not engaging, the vocal cords aren't engaging for real, and the emotion has to really be there. So it's this combination of these pre-records with the live mic that got them over the hump, and the amount of prep that they put in. The more prep you're able to do, the more those insecurities can be, dealt with. But even so, that said, when it came to roll on every performance I'm talking about music, that was the anxiety levels were like through the roof.
But it looks so authentic. And is that because of the live singing? And what were you doing to make it look like? I mean, it felt like we were watching a live performance. It didn't. I've seen a lot of shows where with lip singing, and it never felt real. This was very authentic.
Yeah. Well, the key is that, when you put in that amount of prep, and something like 7 months of pre-records, and that's playing in your ear, and you're singing, you're reliving that, you're all that experience, and you're also in the situation. I always find I love working in locations because it's almost like a form of method for the actors. I think most actors prefer that than, a green screen studio, for instance, which so to have the band there, to have the the audience, the live audience there in front of them, to have wear the actual outfits, to be in the venues. I mean, we actually filmed at the Grand Opry. So I think all of that added to that channeling of those performances. And also these are, they're incredible actors that understand really the emotional journey. That was always what we kept coming back to. So even the way we designed, despite 4 different production designers and 6 different DPs, it was crazy. It was also COVID. It was, all this stuff going off. We managed to design a journey where those songs were actually like inner narration of the emotions that they were going through at that point in their life. So I think that was key to making it more than just a live performance. It was actually almost, each scene was like equal to them in the bedroom or them at home. Do you know what? Having a fight or having a reconnecting and getting together again. So I think that added to that. So I think really it was the amount of prep, the pre-records, the actual environment of shooting, and the tracking that emotional journey, if that makes sense.
Each of these episodes feels like little chapters of their lives. And the first episode's so entertaining. It pulls you right in, and it sucks you in, so you're ready to binge. Like now people can binge it all at once. But we see George's struggle with alcoholism, but we also see his sense of humor and the things that his personality. How did you set the tone with that first episode? What was your goal to say, okay, we need to really set the tone here to bring the audience in?
Well, exactly that, actually, that you mentioned. There was definitely, we wanted to get, and this is also a side of Michael that a lot of people haven't seen. As an actor, there was a lot of humor and vulnerability and awkwardness, and we really wanted to amplify that. And also the thing is, they were young, and this was sort of the tragedy of the relationship, of course, is that they were always out of sync, and George was a total train wreck when, Tammy finally connected with him, and her dreams came true, except that he was just this train wreck. But in a way, there was also a humorous, in that heady early days of a relationship, there's a kind of excitement and and I think a lot of humor comes out of like also black humor. There's around his own struggle, his demons that he'd been struggling with, and actually knowing a lot of addicts and having grown up with a lot of people that have struggled with this illness, and it really is an illness. It's not this. That's another reason I wanted to do the show, is that to break that taboo of addiction. That it's an illness that we all have, has affected most people's lives, in either, if not directly, indirectly. And I think, but there's a lot of black humor that comes out of, especially, I would say, I'm generalizing here, there's a lot more black humor that comes out of alcoholics than drug addicts, in my experience. I don't know why that is. There's something.
It's a good observation.
Yeah. So I think, and then, and there's two different, very, George was very old school alcoholic that moved into the cocaine that was of the period, whereas Tammy really was one of the early opioid victims. She represents the opioid crisis in a way, from actual medical issues that's what triggered it, and her own emotional issues. And of course, ironically, by the time George miraculously got it together, she was, it was hopeless too. Yeah. She slid down even further than George, which I guess that's a spoiler. Sorry. Reset.
Yeah, no, I mean, when they're back at the top of their game, I want to talk a little bit about.
Sorry, but just another one quick thing about that you just reminded me was also the exuberance of their connection with their audience was like, so we wanted to, that's why starting it at the Grand Ole Opry and where they first connected was so important, because that audience were right up against the stage. It was actually a radio show. They were a reflection of their audience, and they were much more connected to their audience in the sense that they were singing songs about what their audiences had lived through as well and shared, a bit like, the punk scene. The audiences reflected the bands and vice versa, or like so many other mediums. But so I think that connection was really important and very different, because as they became more successful, we see this disconnect from that grassroots connection. So the audience becomes more distant, and the weight of fame starts to erode things, and starts to actually bear its more uglier consequences.
What was it like shooting and building that Vegas performance? I mean, these are two country singers that come into Vegas at at performance. It wasn't, the popular thing to do at the time for a country act. And so what was it like to just recreate and build that moment?
Well, I mean, and that was part of, there were these pivotal sort of moments, that we tracked. My whole thing coming into this was the amount of songs, like how do we make each song feel different and plant it more in the context of what these characters are going through emotionally at the time. So Vegas, of course, was at that time, that was like the mecca of entertainment for, big singers, Elvis, etc., and the Brat Pack. And to your point, actually, no country singers had performed there. This was the first big opening doors for country in a world so that only terrified George all the more, because George always struggled with playing live and being in the spotlight. He hated the spotlight, whereas Tammy loved the spotlight. but then the spotlight also, became her own worst enemy. And as it can do. So Vegas was the moment for Stand By Your Man, which was, they both had these two, if you had to pick any song, George had He Stopped Loving Her Today, and then Tammy had Stand By Your Man, and they were the two kind of huge moments in their lives. And so for Tammy, that was all about being alone at her right when she needed George the most, because this Vegas crowd actually lionized George, and were, for a female country singer, especially, to be up there without, that was quite, in those times, quite an unusual circumstance. So for Tammy to wind up there without George was like just a huge thing. So we wanted to amplify that loneliness, and also the kind of initial aggression of the crowd. The audience was like, so we constructed it where there were two perspectives. We were very up close and personal with Tammy, as feeling her fear, feeling she didn't want to perform, she had to somehow do it. And the crowd did turn on her, and this is all based on fact, and she was left utterly alone. So we have this incredible awkward moment with and we wanted to get the scale of Vegas, the razzmatazz. So you have the pressure of this big industry beast judging them, and having that weight upon all on eyes on Tammy. And of course it turned around, and she somehow pulled it off at that, that moment. And Stand By Your Man, she did actually go into the audience, and she connected with the audience and brought them around, which was, the big battle there of Vegas. Yeah.
And
So,
as we run out of time
oh,
here.
and also realism. That was all based on actual venues in Vegas, and the set, and was constructed around actual footage that we had. Yeah.
And as we wind
Also, sorry, and the way the light show took over, and kind of the difference of the environment versus what we're used to seeing in the country venues couldn't be more different.
And just as a final question, as we run out of time, it's such a fantastic series. I loved it so much. What was it like that last day when you said cut for the final time? What was it like on set? And when you look back on it, what are you most proud of about this series?
Well, there was huge. It was a very tough shoot, and by the time we got to Nashville, there was something very magical about ending in Nashville, because we were in the actual Grand Opry, which has such an amazing history. It was, there was this very critical turning moment of where it was the opposite of He Stopped Loving Her Today for Tammy. This is, that was when George was at his lowest, and somehow came through by the use of Billy Sherrill manipulating the situation with Tammy. And we echoed that in Nashville. And the last performance Jessica did was Help Me Make It Through the Night. And that was so, there was such a huge weight off everyone's shoulders, but particularly Jessica, when she finished that song, because she knew that was the last song. And of course, and that was, there was the pressure of, time and all of this. There was so much we had to achieve and get through. And, there was the comment about, it's just about the performance. We were struggling with that deep blue light. And luckily, we got that blue light through, because the blue light was an integral part of the emotional character journey, for what she was experiencing. So it was part and parcel of that performance. So it was whenever I'd be able to bring that cinematic language into the TV space that I'm most proud of. And that's an example where there was quite, given the circumstances, a lot of pressure of just filming it more as a performance without that element. And so I'm very proud of those moments when the cinematic language was allowed to enter into their and build and support their emotional character journey.
Well, it's a fascinating story about these two American icons. We've got our fingers crossed for you and the entire cast and crew at the upcoming Emmy nominations. And thanks for sitting down with Gold Derby today.
Thank you.